Hello and welcome to another Head2Head, and good morning, Keith Sutherland.
Good morning, Dennis English.
Keith, we've just come off another long weekend with Australia Day and a really touching award, a tribute to Darryl McClure, the late Darryl McClure.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic award, probably long overdue, I would have thought, for even though it's a posthumous award. Darryl, what he did for the community at the young age, where he sort of went right through politics, the things he's been involved in, and obviously yourself and him on creating Bendigo IPTV, is just one of the many accolades that Darryl deserves. And it's so sad to see that Darryl passed away in March last year and wasn't able to acknowledge that this award was given to him for recognition of the hard work that he's done, not just for Bendigo but beyond. And I just think it's a really fitting award, but sad that he wasn't here to receive it personally.
I remember at the eulogy at Darryl's service, I remember thinking then, how on earth do you pack that much living into one lifetime? And it makes me feel really like I've dropped the ball big time, because I don't know how he did. He started very early, didn't he, in life, in terms of his public life?
Channel 8 back in those days with yourself up there. And
but council even in his early 20s. Like he didn't sort of wait till he was 30, 35, 40 to get involved. He was out there and doing things at 20 and active in local government and then, of course, state government. So, no, really, really touching. I mean, enormous amount, I think, to the family as well, to Danita and family. So, well done, Darryl. Australia Day, Keith, you've said yourself, seems to get bigger and better, and there's a real sense of national pride, I think, around the country, around the place, the way things are today, I think, anyway. Yeah,
just with the nationalisation ceremonies and all the other things that sort of go with it. It's just amazing, and things that happened around the lake. I happened to be in Melbourne, lucky enough for King's Domain, seeing, and you would have been in your element with all these old cars, RACV sponsoring them, the parade, multiculturalism. It just brings all Australians together to recognise what a wonderful country we've got, and we shouldn't take it for granted. You go overseas and see all the problems, but Australia, now we sort of recognise it. And I know that there's some arguments about the recognition of Aboriginals, and they're seeing it as a bad day for them. But, combining all the great things that Australians have done in that period of time, I just think it's good to celebrate. And there's a bit of history there for the Sutherland family too, because the first white man to die on Australian soil was a Sutherland. So
oh, really?
History. So there you go. It came out with Captain James Cook.
I didn't know that. How?
So there you go. That's why there's Sutherland Shire in Sydney. Because
and what was he in for, Keith? Stealing a loaf of bread back in the old mother country?
Knowing one of the Sutherlands back then, but yes, Fosby Sutherland was his name. But yeah, no, I think it's great to recognise that back into that period of time. They're saying to change the date, but I think that's the date we should stick with, and let's move on and just accept that that's what's happening. And it is a wonderful recognition of the multicultural society we've now become.
Absolutely, Keith. Couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that really gets to me, and I've noticed that particularly the last few years, the young guys that are driving around, and girls for that matter, driving around in cars with their Australian flags out. And I just think that's fantastic. I saw two young blokes sitting on their verandas out towards the stadium there, both with big, and I mean big, Australian flags across the front veranda. And that's not something that I remember seeing 20, 30 years ago. It's become much more visual now, I think. But talking about cars and on the road and that, the only downside I picked up this morning in the national press this morning, that reports suggesting that 1 in 5 drivers tested over the long weekend tested positive for drugs in their system. And this is an enormous thing. I think, there's been a lot of work done around the 0.05 issue. But if you suddenly found that 1 in 5 drivers was 0.05, everyone would be having panic attacks over something like that. I cannot believe that 1 in 5 drivers tested positive for drugs.
Just prior or just after Christmas, I was acknowledging exactly what you're saying in Adelaide, where it was 50% drugs, 50% alcohol.
That's incredible.
And everyone was absolutely shocked by those statistics, and it's growing enormously, particularly with the ice epidemic. And it's a very scary statistic, and you see some of the crazy things that happened with that young lady that was killed over in Tasmania. The baby was survived, and just terrible, terrible things that are going on, and some crazy people on the road. And my wife and I are only just talking about it, coming back from Melbourne, how you tell your kids to be careful on the roads, drive carefully, but it's not just that, it's others.
It's who else is on the road.
Things like drugs, like alcohol, the message should be getting through, but it's not.
Well, we had the drug forum last year that Betty IPTV filmed and presented. I think it's still available online now, but one of the things that came through from the top cop locally, and we've had him in here as well, a succession of local chief supers, have all said the same thing. Alcohol's the biggest problem in the community in terms of policing. It's behind the majority of domestic violence issues, alcohol related, so on and so on. But I would have thought, whilst they say that drugs are the smaller part of the problem, to have 1 in 5 drivers testing positive for drugs, it worries the hell out of me being on the roads, you know, under those conditions.
No, just crazies out there, and I don't know what the police do, and you can lock them up, the jails are full, they give them suspended sentences, all these sorts of things, but it's not changing the system, and it doesn't matter what sort of education, the amount of money that they put through the system, it just doesn't seem to be working, and people are doing stupid things.
Yeah. Keith, we're in an election year, as we've acknowledged in other programs, and you've already had a shadow federal minister in. Jason Clare I suppose he took the party line to some extent on the NBN, but I know it's a bee or you've got a bee in your bonnet about the NBN locally, where Bendigo would seem to have been caught with its pants down, where you've got Ballarat and Shepparton and places like that in a more advanced state in terms of their access to the potential for NBN. Were there any surprises in your discussion with Jason Clare?
Not really. I think it was pretty much, as you said, follow the party line, but it was more than that. I get really annoyed to think that Ballarat is getting fibre to the premises, Shepparton's got fibre to the premises, Bendigo gets fibre to the node. That is the second-rate system, and as Jason Clare said this morning, that 20% of Australians will have fibre to the node, which is not the best system. You're not going to get the speeds as we talked about. One of the questions I put to him was that Malcolm Turnbull suggested we'll never need 1 gigabit of speed for the internet, but as he said, he's just come back from Singapore and other countries where 1 gigabit is the norm. So when we're talking education, where we're talking health in the future, 1 gigabit is going to have to be the norm, and we'll never reach those speeds with fibre to the node. So yeah, it really annoys the hell out of me to think that Bendigo is a poor relation in this. Don't know where we went wrong. I know that was all set to go, and of course prior to the last election, Bendigo was on the agenda. Well,
there was a lot of noise around the NBN and the hospital, you know, how we were going to have the world's best hospital here, and there's so many dollars involved in that, and it was so high-tech in terms of its approach to treating people rather than having coming as inpatients to treat people in their homes using NBN and all those sorts of things. I thought we were riding on, you know...
Well, it is wired up for fibre to the premises there, but the thing is it's just the systems that are leading up to it that we're not going to be able to cope with it using the old technology of copper.
Well, not when people at the other end, on the receiving end of a consultation from the hospital, and that's all very well for them to have it, but for the person that's living in Elmore or Gornong or Strathfield, so whatever, that doesn't have it, it's not going to be a lot of use to them trying to have a consultation. Be interested to find out what the situation is then, and if there's any scope there for us to... It sounds like the horse is bolted. We can't catch up on where Ballarat and Shepparton...
We're locked into the fibre to the node now, and that's it, end of story. But also interesting that we talked about the tower that's already out at Tuleen, that's been commissioned back in 2013, but it's not operational because we don't have the backup, we don't have the capacity, the new satellites that have been launched, and so Huntley, Gornong and other areas still don't have it out that way.
The whole thing we've said before.
It's an absolute problem.
Well, everyone wants their mobile to work, but nobody wants a tower in their backyard, as we've so often said here. I noticed when you were interviewing Jason Clare too that you were very defensive of Malcolm Turnbull and saying, look, you know, no, I'm only joking. I know that you've got also been in your bonnet about Turnbull doing a U-turn supposedly on, say, things like, I guess before he became Prime Minister, he was seen very much as the bloke that was in support of the Republic. He was in support of gay marriage, and the NBN was going to be a fix-up job. No worries, he could do it at lost less money and that. How big an issue is that going to be, do you think, as in an election year, that he's sort of, is he being smart, playing smart politics by keeping the middle ground there, and not saying, all right, bang, we're having a republic, or bang, we're having same-sex marriage?
I think what Jason Clare said this morning is spot on. Prior to the election, Tony Abbott made all his promises. Then he broke all the promises when he first came to power.
Like most of them do, I would suggest
fine,
to you.
That's okay. But he broke more than most. Anyway, and he broke a lot of people's hearts by doing so. Anyway, moving on from that, when Malcolm Turnbull took over, it was like a breath of fresh air. He's a person that stands by his conviction. As you said, strong on the climate change policy, and lost his position because of that, of course, when Tony Abbott took it over from him back in 2009 and whatever it was. He was also strong on same-sex marriage, strong on the Republic, ran the Republican movement back in 2009, I think, also. But at the end of the day, no, it was way back before that, sorry. At the end of the day, people thought he's a man of conviction, strong politician, and he's going to follow through. Gets in power, always his ambition was to be Prime Minister, and I always liked Malcolm Turnbull. He was always the one that, to me, was the best to lead the Liberal Party.
But you've got to be a politician. Like I would put to you, Keith Sutherland, that it's no good, and that people with really strong convictions that stand up for their convictions, in most cases, fail as politicians. And I'd use examples like Christina Keneally out of New South Wales. I'd use somebody like John Hewson even, that I think would have been a tremendous Prime Minister, where they let themselves, or not, I'm not saying Christina so much, but certainly with Hewson, was probably a bit too honest in terms of the GST and everything else. What you'll find, I think, and this is only from me looking at politicians generally, the ones that tend to float to the top, they've got to be really cunning, savvy political strategists first.
And Turnbull's all of those things.
Well, this is what I mean. And what I'm suggesting to you is that Turnbull hasn't done a U-turn on any of those issues, that he's faced at the moment with the prospect of having an absolute landslide victory come November, if it goes that long, could happen before, with
Bill Shorten.
Billy Shorten in the situation he is with the polls. Turnbull's headed for an absolute landslide. Why jeopardise that victory this year for another 3-year term? Why jeopardise that victory by doing anything now to rock the boat? I reckon he's a very smart strategist. I'm not saying I support the line he's taken either. I just see that he's very savvy in a way that Hewson wasn't, and he's saying we're going to go to the poll, we're going to absolutely cream them, and we will come out here with a huge majority. I won't have to deal with a hostile Senate and all that sort of stuff. He'll have the whole show to himself, and then watch what he does with those issues that you've highlighted, in particular the same-sex things.
You may be right on that. He is very savvy, there's no question. He's always wanted to be Prime Minister, but he's now seen as a hollow man. His man of principle is gone, finished. And the only reason he's doing all this, and we all know that, is that Eric Abetz and Tony Abbott, the right wing of the party, that allowed him, Tony Abbott didn't, but they allowed him to be Prime Minister. So, because they thought, well, this is going to be a landslide Labor's way. Let's put Malcolm Turnbull in, we'll control him. And they are totally controlling him. You can only see what's going on. He's a shell of a man now. He's a shell of a person with no principles anymore.
I can't see that that's correct, Keith.
And the right wing of the party are controlling him. They are pulling his strings now, and he is made to look like the hollow man of politics. And as longer that we go, the more the public are going to realise that, yes, he's being pragmatic, wants to win with a landslide, as you say. I don't agree with that. But at the end of the day, they will win the next election, no question about that, because of the poor showing of Bill Shorten. The Labor Party are locked into that situation. It's too late. We had a man in this program this morning who was probably the heir apparent, who would be miles better than Bill Shorten, but that's not going to happen. But Tony Abbott is controlling Malcolm Turnbull.
Not a bit of it. Turnbull's
right-wing mates are controlling him.
Turnbull's a smart political animal, smart enough, and he's learned. He's had a blood nose on the ropes. Remember when he lost the job once prior? That's right. So he knows how the system works now, and I think he's applying real business cunning to saying, all right, I'm not rocking the boat just for the time being. I need the support of some of these people around the Abbott camp. But I have echoes of the Ruddster in mind, Kevin Rudd, when he won with a landslide, and everyone thought he was the champion of the world, and Rudd could pretty much run any race he wanted to and run the show himself. And of course it went to his head to some extent. But I see Turnbull coming out the other side of the election. These people will not have any influence over him at all, and he'll be because he's going to have a hell of a landslide the way things are going now. So look, it'll be interesting to see, but I think that people who are saying that he's lost his principles and convictions are missing the point here about surviving at top level in probably the ugliest environment in Australian life, and that is the political environment.
Well, I think we're seeing the wheels fall off the cart now, and time will tell. And I don't disagree with your logic on the reason he's doing this now, but he's seen as a hollow man. And as time goes on, his principles are out the door, and the public will see he only wanted power, not principle.
Let's imagine for a minute, Keith, you get a tap on the shoulder today and they say, we want you to be Billy Bob Shorten's personal advisor and strategist. We want you to steer him to a victory in the next election. What would you do? What would you say to Bill Shorten to try and get him to turn things around for himself in the polls?
Step down, put Jason Clare straight in.
Well, Jason Clare's going to be your number one fan the way things are going.
Well, I think it was very impressive this morning. You've got to agree yourself.
I know, I do. Yeah, who's very mature.
Topic, He knew the subject very well and spoke extremely well. And I think he's probably the heir apparent. But I don't see how Bill Shorten can turn it around. I just don't in this period of time, because how do you come off the ropes when you're down as low as 15% popularity? Turnbull's up at 70%. So I don't know how you can turn that around. But I guess the only way that can turn around is the public see more and more through Malcolm Turnbull, lack of principle. That's the only way it can turn around. Won't be through what Bill Shorten's done. It's what Malcolm Turnbull's doing.
The final note on that from me anyway, or observation, would be how disappointed I was to see Tony Abbott not riding off into the sunset. I cannot believe that ego, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know what else you call it.
Ego's a dirty word. We remember
it
that.
It is, yeah. For him to put his hand up and say he wants to stay in the backbenches, and for anyone to think that he's going to sit on the backbench and keep his head down and do his
job. Just
do
a rub, for sure.
Well, that's so frustrating. I just don't get, when's enough? But my argument has been for many, many years, Keith, that you wouldn't have a situation like that if politicians were locked into a set number of terms so that they cannot create a career like these blokes have. That's all they know and that's all they want, and they thrive on it. And when they finish that, then they're off to the US or somewhere.
Bloody the Chancellor probably going to England.
Some
22
cushy,
years in Parliament.
A cushy diplomatic post and more. It's just ridiculous.
I would have taken the posting in London without a doubt.
All right. Well, the next ambassador to London, or High Commissioner, whatever, Keith Sutherland.
Please, yeah.
Well, if Jason Clare gets a gig one day, I reckon he might come knocking on the door and offer you the post, Keith.
I'd be very happy to accept it.
I bet you would. All right, Keith, thanks so much for taking the time again, and thank you for catching up with us this week, and we'll see you again next week.